There are films, and then there are monuments. The Godfather, released in 1972, is not simply a movie. It is a cultural earthquake that permanently shifted the landscape of American cinema. Directed by Francis Ford Coppola and based on Mario Puzo's best-selling novel, the film redefined what a crime drama could be, elevating it far beyond shootouts and mob clichés into something resembling Shakespearean tragedy. Decades after its release, it still sits comfortably at the very top of nearly every greatest films ever made list. But here is the thing. Most people only know what they saw on screen. Behind the camera, an entirely different drama was unfolding, one filled with real gangsters, career-threatening gambles, improvised genius, and decisions that nearly destroyed the film before it even had a chance to become legendary. Today, we are pulling back the curtain completely. These are 20 weird, wild, and wonderful facts you almost certainly did not know about The Godfather. It seems almost unthinkable today, but the man who delivered one of the most iconic performances in cinema history was very nearly banned from the film entirely. Paramount Pictures executives were deeply hostile toward casting Marlon Brando as Vito Corleone. Their reasoning was not irrational. Throughout the 1960s, Brando had appeared in a string of commercial disappointments, and his reputation on set was notoriously difficult. Studio head Stanley Jaffe was reportedly so firm in his opposition that he declared Brando would never appear in the picture while he remained in charge. It was Francis Ford Coppola's fierce belief in Brando's transformative potential that kept the door open. Coppola arranged an informal home screen test, encouraging Brando to stuff cotton balls into his cheeks to create the heavy, bulldog-like jowls of an aging Don. He slicked back his hair, dropped his voice, and became someone else entirely. When Coppola secretly screened this footage for the executives without revealing who they were watching, they were stunned by the commanding, almost mythological presence on screen. They had no idea it was the man they had already rejected. Brando was ultimately approved, but under humiliating conditions. He would receive no upfront salary, post a $1 million bond against potential disruptions, and submit to a formal screen test. He agreed. And then he won the Academy Award for Best Actor. Few scenes in cinema history have delivered a shock quite like the moment Jack Woltz pulls back his silk bedsheets and discovers something unspeakable sharing his bed. What most viewers still do not realize is that no special effects, no prosthetics, and no Hollywood trickery were involved. The horse head was real, obtained from a New Jersey slaughterhouse that processed horses for dog food. Coppola made a deliberate creative decision to use a genuine severed head because he wanted an authentic, visceral horror that no prop department could replicate. The head arrived on set packed inside a cooler, and in a particularly cruel stroke of genius, the production team did not warn actor John Marley, who played the role of Woltz, about what he was about to encounter. When Marley reached down beneath his sheets during filming and his foot connected with something cold, wet, and unmistakably animal, his scream was not acting. It was pure, unfiltered human terror. Coppola had always maintained that for that scene to work, the fear could not be performed, it had to be lived. He got exactly what he wanted. That moment remains one of the most genuinely disturbing sequences in mainstream cinema, and its power comes entirely from the fact that nobody in that bed was pretending. Before a single frame was shot, The Godfather was already tangled up in real-world organized crime politics. Joseph Colombo, a powerful New York mafia boss who also led the Italian-American Civil Rights League, took personal offense at the film's portrayal of Italian Americans as criminals. He organized protests, rallied thousands of supporters, and threatened to flood the production with union disruptions that would have made filming nearly impossible. At the height of his influence, Colombo could draw crowds of over 50,000 people to his public rallies, which gave him enormous leverage. Producer Albert Ruddy eventually sat down with Colombo and negotiated a deal. The words mafia and Cosa Nostra would be removed entirely from the script. Colombo's organization would be permitted to review the screenplay, and Paramount would donate a portion of the film's premiere proceeds to an Italian-American hospital. With those terms met, Colombo withdrew his opposition and production proceeded. The surreal irony was impossible to miss. A film about the hidden power of organized crime was itself being shaped by the hidden power of organized crime. When Colombo was shot in public just months later, in June 1971, the parallel to the film's own storyline sent a chill through everyone who had worked on it. One of the central challenges of The Godfather was making its large ensemble cast feel like a genuine family rather than a collection of actors delivering lines at each other. Coppola's solution was elegantly simple. Before filming began, he hosted an Italian dinner at a restaurant in East Harlem, inviting the entire principal cast to dine together while remaining fully in character. Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, Robert Duvall, Diane Keaton, and Talia Shire all gathered around the same table, dressed as their Corleone counterparts, eating pasta and improvising dialogue as though the cameras were already rolling. Brando, naturally, commanded the table with quiet authority, while the others jostled for position around him in ways that mirrored their characters' relationships almost perfectly. Robert Duvall later recalled that Brando's presence was so magnetic that even when he looked away, the other actors felt compelled to react. Coppola believed that actors who had genuinely broken bread together, laughed together, and negotiated social space around a dinner table would carry that embodied familiarity directly into their performances. He was absolutely right. The warmth, tension, and unspoken history that radiates through the Corleone family scenes on screen was born not in a rehearsal room, but over plates of pasta in a New York restaurant. It is difficult to imagine The Godfather without Al Pacino's slow-burn transformation as Michael Corleone, but for a very tense period early in production, Pacino's future in the film hung by the thinnest possible thread. Paramount executives reviewed the early footage and were alarmed. Pacino was too quiet, too restrained, too interior, nothing like the dominant, charismatic leading men they expected to anchor a major studio picture. They demanded his immediate replacement and began discussing alternatives including Ryan O'Neal, Robert Redford, and Warren Beatty. Coppola found himself in the impossible position of defending an actor whose approach he did not yet fully understand. The turning point came when Coppola made a bold tactical decision. He rearranged the shooting schedule to film the pivotal restaurant assassination scene ahead of its planned position. In that scene, Michael Corleone murders a corrupt police captain and a rival mob boss in a small Italian restaurant, and it requires the actor to embody an almost unbearable internal pressure before releasing it in a single devastating act of violence. Pacino delivered something extraordinary. The stillness that had worried the executives was suddenly revealed as the eye of a hurricane. After that footage was screened, no one spoke about replacing him again. Pacino himself later reflected that a single scene saved his entire career in the film. The novel that gave birth to the film was a considerably raunchier and more lurid piece of work than the dignified epic Coppola put on screen. Mario Puzo's original manuscript was packed with explicit subplots, graphic sexuality, and morally outrageous material that would have been completely impossible to translate into a mainstream 1972 film. Several storylines involving the character of Johnny Fontaine, who bore obvious similarities to Frank Sinatra, were stripped out entirely, including a scandalous affair with a married woman and detailed accounts of how Fontaine used mob connections to manipulate his Hollywood career. Other sections of the book contained explicit anatomical material and crude humor that belonged firmly in the realm of pulp fiction rather than prestige cinema. Coppola and Puzo worked together on the adaptation with a shared understanding that the novel's genuine power lay not in its more sensational passages, but in its portrait of a family being slowly consumed by the business of violence. Their task was essentially one of excavation, digging through the pulp to find the tragedy underneath. Every scene of gratuitous content that they removed was replaced by something that carried genuine emotional or moral weight. The result was a film that was in many respects far more powerful and enduring than the book that inspired it. The opening scene of The Godfather is one of the most studied sequences in film school history. Vito Corleone sits in shadow, stroking a cat with terrifying gentleness, as he receives petitioners on his daughter's wedding day. That cat was not in the script. It was not trained. It had no business being there at all. A stray cat had wandered onto the Paramount lot that morning, and when filming began, Brando simply reached down, picked it up, and incorporated it into his performance as naturally as if it had always been part of the scene. Coppola recognized immediately that the image was extraordinary. The contrast between the Don's absolute power and the small, purring creature in his lap created a visual metaphor that no scriptwriter could have planned. There was one minor technical complication. The cat purred so loudly during Brando's dialogue that the sound team could not get clean audio, and several of his lines had to be re-recorded in post-production. But the image itself was kept exactly as it happened, spontaneous and unscripted. It became one of the most imitated and referenced images in cinema, spawning countless parodies and homages, all tracing their origins back to a stray cat that wandered onto a film set on the right morning. While Coppola was spending much of early production fighting to protect the jobs of his cast members, his own position was equally precarious. Paramount executives grew increasingly frustrated with his slow shooting pace and rising costs, and there were serious internal conversations about replacing him with a more commercially reliable director. Coppola later admitted that he lived with the feeling of potential termination throughout much of the shoot. Some editors complained that he was not generating enough usable coverage. The studio was watching the budget with mounting anxiety. What saved him, ultimately, was the footage itself. As scenes like the restaurant assassination and Brando's commanding early sequences were assembled, even the most skeptical executives began to understand what Coppola was building. Marlon Brando reportedly told the studio directly that if Coppola was removed, he would walk off the production entirely. That combination of artistic evidence and star power gave Coppola just enough room to finish his vision. He rewarded that patience by delivering one of the most profitable films in Paramount's history. Given the real-world mob involvement that surrounded the production, it was perhaps inevitable that genuine organized crime figures would find their way onto the set. On at least one occasion, two men sent by Pennsylvania crime boss Russell Bufalino arrived to visit Brando during filming. Their purpose was not threatening. They had come to deliver a compliment. In Brando's own recollection, the men told